What if I told you that in 1882, in the heart of New Mexico territory, a woman's face could change the fate of an entire town? What if I told you that behind a simple black veil lay a secret so shocking that when revealed, it would challenge everything people believed about beauty, worth, and the courage to love? This is the story they tried to bury. The story of a veiled bride, a fearless black cowboy, and a moment that would echo through history. But I warn you, what you're about to hear will shake you to your core. Stay until the very end, because the truth behind that veil, it's not what anyone expected. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I need you to do something. If this is your first time here on The Black Rancher, we're dedicated to bringing you the untold stories of black heroes from the American frontier. Stories that have been hidden for far too long. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. These stories deserve to be told, and you deserve to hear them. And if this story moves you, and trust me it will, share it with someone who needs to hear about real courage and real love. Now, let's step back to 1882, to a dusty town called Esperanza, where everything was about to change. New Mexico territory, September 1882. The sun blazed mercilessly over Esperanza as Ezekiel "Zeke" Washington guided his chestnut mare down the main street. At 35, Zeke carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned every dollar in his pocket and every acre of his land through sweat, determination, and an unshakable belief in his own worth. His broad shoulders filled out a clean white shirt, and his black vest bore no dust, despite the long ride from his ranch. The silver spurs on his boots caught the sunlight as he dismounted outside Martinez Trading Post, the largest general store in this predominantly Mexican-American settlement. Esperanza was different from other frontier towns Zeke had visited. Here, the mix of cultures created a more tolerant atmosphere than the rigid hierarchies he'd encountered in Anglo settlements. Still, as one of the few black landowners in the territory, and the most successful, his presence always drew attention. "Senor Washington," called out Miguel Martinez from behind the store counter, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "Cómo está? How are the cattle this season?" "Can't complain, Miguel," Zeke replied, removing his hat to reveal close-cropped hair with distinguished gray at the temples. "The spring rains were good to us. My herd's stronger than ever." As they discussed business, Zeke needed supplies for his growing ranch. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Through the store window, they watched a fancy black carriage roll down the street, followed by several men on horseback. "Ah," Miguel said, his expression growing somber. "The Ashford family has arrived." Zeke raised an eyebrow. The name meant nothing to him, but Miguel's tone suggested it should. "Richard Ashford," Miguel explained, lowering his voice. "Rich cattle baron from back east. Bought the old Henderson spread, plans to turn it into the biggest ranch in the territory. Word is he's brought his daughter out here to find her a husband." Through the window they watched as the carriage stopped in front of the town's small hotel. A portly man in an expensive suit emerged first, clearly Richard Ashford. He turned to help someone from the carriage, and Zeke's attention was immediately captured. The woman who stepped out was entirely covered in black fabric, a heavy dress that revealed nothing of her figure, and a thick black veil that completely obscured her face. Even her hands were covered by long black gloves. She moved carefully, almost fearfully, staying close to her father's side. "Dios mío," Miguel whispered. "Poor girl. Been wearing that veil for 3 months now, ever since they arrived in Santa Fe. No one's seen her face." "Why?" Zeke asked, unable to look away from the mysterious figure. Miguel shrugged. "Some say she's horribly scarred, others think she's disfigured. Her father just says she's delicate. But he's been putting word out that he'll pay a handsome dowry to any respectable man willing to marry her sight unseen." Zeke watched as father and daughter disappeared into the hotel. Something about the woman's posture, the way she seemed to shrink into herself, stirred something protective in his chest. "Any takers?" he asked. "A few," Miguel said with distaste. "Men more interested in Ashford's money than his daughter's welfare, but she's refused them all. Won't even speak during the meetings, just sits there in that veil, silent as a ghost." That evening, Zeke took a room at the hotel, planning to head back to his ranch the next morning. As he sat in the small dining room, he noticed the veiled woman at a corner table with her father. She hadn't touched her food. "Rebecca," Ashford was saying in a voice loud enough to carry, "you must eat something. We have another gentleman caller tomorrow, Mr. Peterson from the bank. He's quite interested in the arrangement." The woman, Rebecca, seemed to shrink further into her chair. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. "This nonsense has to stop," Ashford continued, his voice growing harsh. "You will marry, and you will marry soon. I won't have you becoming an old maid because of your condition." Zeke found himself gripping his coffee cup tighter. The man was speaking to his daughter like she was a burden to be disposed of. As if sensing his gaze, Rebecca's veiled head turned slightly in his direction. Even through the heavy fabric, Zeke felt the weight of her attention. For a moment, time seemed suspended, then she quickly looked away. Later that night, unable to sleep, Zeke stepped onto the hotel's small balcony for some air. The moonlight cast long shadows across the quiet street, and he was surprised to see a figure in black sitting on a bench in the small garden behind the hotel. Rebecca. She sat perfectly still, her face turned up toward the star-filled sky. Even at this distance, even with the veil, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her silhouette. As if sensing his presence, she turned toward the hotel. Their eyes met, or at least Zeke imagined they did, through that mysterious veil. "Beautiful night," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She nodded but didn't speak. "Mind if I join you? Sometimes the walls feel too close." For a long moment, she was silent, then, barely audible, "If you wish." Zeke made his way down to the garden, moving slowly so as not to alarm her. Up close, he could see that her hands were trembling slightly. "I'm Ezekiel Washington," he said, settling onto the opposite end of the bench, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "But most folks call me Zeke." "I know who you are," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Father mentioned you. Said you own the largest ranch run by someone like you in the territory." "Someone like me," Zeke repeated with a slight smile. "That's one way to put it." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both gazing up at the stars. "Why do you wear the veil?" Zeke asked gently. Rebecca's hands went immediately to the fabric covering her face, as if to ensure it was still in place. "Please," she whispered, her voice filled with panic. "Please don't ask me that." "I'm sorry," Zeke said quickly. "I didn't mean to upset you. It's just—" She paused, her voice barely audible. "It's better this way for everyone." "I doubt that's true." "You don't understand," Rebecca said, her voice stronger now, tinged with pain. "You can't understand. What I am. What I look like. It's better that no one sees." Zeke studied her profile in the moonlight. "Miss Rebecca, I've seen a lot of ugly in this world. Most of it has nothing to do with how a person looks." She turned toward him then, and he could feel the intensity of her gaze through the veil. "You don't know what you're saying." "Maybe not, but I know what I see when I look at you." "What?" she whispered. Someone who's been told lies about herself for so long, she started believing them. Rebecca was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with unshed tears. "My father says no man will want me as I am, that the veil is a mercy, to them and to me." "Your father's wrong." The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca stood abruptly, her black skirts rustling. "I should go," she said. "Father doesn't like me to be out alone." "Rebecca," Zeke said, standing as well, Would you like to take a walk tomorrow, in the daylight? We could talk more." She was already backing away. "I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't." She hurried toward the hotel, leaving Zeke alone in the garden with more questions than answers. The next morning brought news that spread through Esperanza like wildfire. Rebecca Ashford had refused another suitor, the third in 2 weeks. This time, however, there had been witnesses to the confrontation. Zeke heard the story from Maria Santos, the hotel owner's wife, as she served him breakfast. "Ay, Dios mío," Maria exclaimed, crossing herself. "Poor girl. That Mr. Peterson. He got angry when she wouldn't even lift her veil to let him see what he was buying. Started yelling about how he wasn't going to pay good money for damaged goods he couldn't even inspect. Zeke's jaw tightened. What did Ashford do? Nothing, Maria said, her voice filled with disgust. Just sat there like his daughter wasn't being insulted right in front of him. The girl, she ran from the room crying. Haven't seen her since. Zeke finished his breakfast quickly and made his way to the lobby, where he found Richard Ashford drinking whiskey despite the early hour. Mr. Ashford, Zeke said, approaching the older man's table, I wonder if I might have a word. Ashford looked up, his bloodshot eyes taking in Zeke's appearance with poorly concealed distaste. I know who you are, Washington. Heard you've done well for yourself out here. I have, Zeke said simply, not taking the bait. I wanted to speak with you about your daughter. Ashford's expression hardened. Rebecca is not available for your kind of interest. Zeke felt the familiar surge of anger but kept his voice level. I'm a landowner, Mr. Ashford. I own 3,000 acres of the finest grazing land in the territory, with a herd of over 2,000 head of cattle. I have money in 3 banks and employ 12 men year-round. Your point? My point is that I'm a better prospect than any of the fortune hunters who've been sniffing around your daughter's dowry. Ashford laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I'd marry my daughter to a what? Zeke asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The older man had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Look, Washington, you seem like a decent enough fellow, but Rebecca needs to marry within her own social circle. The same social circle that's been treating her like damaged goods? Ashford's face flushed. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. For a moment, Ashford seemed to wrestle with himself. Finally, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. My daughter was injured in an accident back in Philadelphia. She's not the same girl she was before. The veil, it's necessary. Necessary for whom? For everyone, Ashford snapped. Do you think I enjoy watching men recoil from my own daughter? Do you think this is easy for any of us? Despite his dislike for the man, Zeke heard genuine pain in Ashford's voice. What kind of accident? Ashford was quiet for a long moment. A fire, he said finally. In our home. Rebecca was trapped. We almost lost her. When she recovered, he shook his head. She hasn't been the same since. Won't let anyone see her face. Barely speaks. I thought bringing her out here, finding her a husband who could see past the physical. It might give her a chance at happiness. But you're going about it all wrong, Zeke said. Treating her like merchandise to be sold sight unseen, making her feel like she has to hide from the world. What would you have me do? Ashford asked, his voice breaking slightly. She won't even look at herself in a mirror anymore. How can I convince a man to marry her when she won't let anyone see her? Maybe start by asking what she wants instead of deciding for her. Ashford stared at him for a long moment. You really want to court my daughter? I want to get to know her, Zeke corrected. The woman I spoke with last night was intelligent, gentle, and kind. That matters more to me than whatever you think is hidden under that veil. And if what's under there isn't what you expect? Zeke met his gaze steadily. Mr. Ashford, I was born a slave. I've been beaten, spit on, and told I wasn't worth the dirt under a white man's boots. I know something about being judged by things you can't control. Your daughter's face, whatever it looks like, doesn't change who she is inside. For the first time since they'd started talking, Ashford looked truly thoughtful. She's in her room, he said finally. Room 7, upstairs. But Washington, she might not see you. She's been refusing all visitors since yesterday. Zeke stood, adjusting his hat. Then I guess I'll have to be patient. He made his way upstairs and knocked gently on the door of room 7. Miss Rebecca, it's Zeke Washington. I was wondering if you'd like to continue our conversation from last night. Silence. I know yesterday was difficult, he continued, speaking through the door. I thought you might want someone to talk to who doesn't see you as a problem to be solved. Still nothing. Zeke settled himself on the floor next to the door, his back against the wall. I'll just wait here for a while if that's all right. Sometimes it helps just knowing someone's nearby. An hour passed, then 2. Guests walking down the hallway gave him curious looks, but Zeke remained patient. Finally, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching the door from inside. "Are you still there?" Rebecca's voice was muffled by the wood. "I'm here." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but Zeke heard the weight of years of rejection behind it. "Because I think you're worth knowing. Because I think you've been listening to the wrong voices for too long." The door opened just a crack. He could see part of her black veil through the narrow opening. I can't let you see me," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to. Not until you're ready. But could we talk? Maybe you could step out into the hallway and we could sit here together. Like this? With the veil? However you're comfortable." The door opened wider, and Rebecca stepped into the hallway. Even in the dim light, Zeke could see that she was shaking. They sat together on the floor, backs against the wall, not touching but close enough that Zeke could hear her breathing. "Tell me about your ranch," Rebecca said after a while. Zeke smiled, hearing genuine curiosity in her voice. "It's beautiful country, rolling hills covered in grass, a creek that runs clear and cold even in summer. I've got a house I built myself, nothing fancy, but it's solid and warm." "Do you live alone?" "Just me and my foreman, Carlos. He's got a wife and 3 kids who live in the bunkhouse. The children keep things lively." "Children," Rebecca said wistfully. "I used to teach children before the accident?" She nodded. "I loved it." Their faces when they finally understood a difficult concept, the way they trusted so completely. "I miss that. What would you teach them?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, but also music and art. Father thought it was frivolous, but I believed children needed beauty in their lives, not just practical skills." They talked for hours, about books, about dreams, about the challenges of frontier life. Rebecca's voice grew stronger, more confident, as the conversation progressed. Zeke found himself captivated by her intelligence, her gentle humor, her obvious compassion for others. "I should go," Rebecca said finally, as the shadows began to lengthen. "Father will be looking for me." "Could we do this again tomorrow?" Zeke asked. Rebecca hesitated. "I don't know if it's fair to you. You don't know. You can't understand what you'd be taking on." "Let me worry about that." "Zeke," she said, using his name for the first time. "What if I'm not what you think I am? What if I'm terrible to look at?" Zeke was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Rebecca, I once knew a woman who was considered the most beautiful in 3 counties. Hair like spun gold, skin like porcelain, figure that made grown men weep. She was also the cruelest person I've ever met. She'd step on a wounded animal rather than help it, speak to servants like they were dirt, and laugh at other people's pain." He paused, then continued. "Beauty that's only on the surface doesn't last. But the kind of beauty I hear in your voice, the kindness in how you speak about those children you taught, that's the kind that grows stronger with time. You can't know that about me. We've barely spoken." "You're right. I can't know everything about you from a few conversations, but I know enough to want to know more. The question is, do you want to know more about me?" Through the veil, he saw her nod slowly. "Then we'll take it one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people getting to know each other." Before we continue with Zeke and Rebecca's story, I want to remind you that you're watching the Black Rancher channel, where we bring you the untold stories of black heroes from the American frontier. These are stories of courage, love, and determination that have been hidden from history books for far too long. If you're enjoying this story, and I know you are, make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is turned on. We publish new stories every week, and each one will open your eyes to the incredible contributions Black Americans made to building the West. Hit that share button too. Send this to someone who needs to hear about real love, real courage, and the power of seeing beyond the surface. Now let's get back to Esperanza, where Zeke is about to make a decision that will change everything. 3 weeks later, the courtship that developed between Zeke and Rebecca was unlike anything Esperanza had ever witnessed. Every afternoon, they could be seen sitting together on the hotel's front porch. He in his clean work clothes, she in her endless black garments, the veil never lifting. They talked about everything: books they'd read, places they'd traveled, dreams they'd harbored. Zeke shared stories of building his ranch from nothing, of the discrimination he'd faced and overcome. Rebecca spoke of her love for teaching, her passion for music, her fear of being a burden to anyone. The townspeople watched with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Many had expected Zeke to grow tired of courting a woman whose face he'd never seen, whose appearance remained a complete mystery. Instead, he seemed more devoted with each passing day. "It's not natural," muttered Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, loud enough for others to hear. "How can a man propose marriage to a woman he's never properly seen?" But Zeke had no intention of proposing, not yet. He was waiting for Rebecca to trust him enough to show herself, and he sensed that pressure would only drive her further into hiding. Richard Ashford, meanwhile, was growing increasingly agitated. 2 more potential suitors had come and gone, both repelled by Rebecca's refusal to reveal her face. The family's money was running low, and Ashford's patience was wearing thin. "This has gone on long enough," he announced one evening during dinner, his voice carrying throughout the small hotel dining room. "Rebecca, I've arranged for you to meet with Mr. Caldwell tomorrow. He owns the largest dry goods store in Santa Fe, and he's agreed to the marriage sight unseen if you'll accept his proposal." Rebecca, who had been picking at her food, went completely still. "No." "What did you say?" "I said no, Father." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I won't marry Mr. Caldwell." Ashford's face turned red. "You will do as I say. I'm tired of your theatrics, tired of this foolishness with that... "Careful, Ashford," came a deep voice from across the room. Zeke had risen from his table, his expression dangerous. "I'd think real carefully about your next words. This is a family matter, Washington. It doesn't concern you." "Anything that concerns Rebecca concerns me." The dining room had gone dead quiet. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. "She's my daughter," Ashford snarled, "and I won't have her throwing away her only chance at marriage for some fantasy romance with a—" "Father, please," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. But Ashford was beyond reason. "Look at yourself," he shouted at his daughter. "You're a damaged woman who won't even show her face. Do you think love is going to overcome that? Do you think any man will truly want you once he sees what's under that veil?" Rebecca flinched as if she'd been struck. She rose from her chair, trembling, and ran from the room. Zeke took a step toward Ashford, his hands clenched into fists. "If you weren't her father, I'd knock you down where you stand." "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Washington? You think you're being noble, courting my daughter like she's some kind of prize, but when reality sets in, when you see what I see every day, you'll run just like every other man. The only ugly thing in this room is your cruelty to your own daughter." Zeke turned and followed Rebecca from the dining room, leaving Ashford standing alone in the uncomfortable silence. He found Rebecca in the hotel garden, sitting on the same bench where they'd first spoken weeks ago. She was crying, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. "Rebecca," Zeke said softly, sitting beside her. "He's right," she choked out. "Father's right about everything. I'm fooling myself and I'm fooling you. Whatever this is between us, it's not real. It can't be real." "Why can't it be real?" "Because you don't know," she cried, turning to face him. "You don't know what I look like. You don't know what the fire did to me. Then show me." The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca went completely still. "Show me," Zeke repeated gently. "Let me see what you've been hiding, and let me decide for myself whether it changes anything." "I can't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" "Because," she struggled to find the words, "because if you look at me the way everyone else does, if you turn away like they all do, I don't think I could survive it. Not from you." Zeke's heart broke at the pain in her voice. "Rebecca, listen to me. I've fallen in love with your mind, your heart, your soul. I love the way you laugh when I tell you stories about Carlos's children. I love how passionate you get when you talk about teaching. I love your gentleness, your strength, your courage. Yes, courage, because it takes courage to keep going when the world has been cruel to you." He paused, then continued. Whatever is under that veil, it's not going to change those feelings. But if you're not ready to show me, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll figure out how to build a life together with the veil. I don't care about your face, Rebecca. I care about you. They sat in silence for a long time, Rebecca crying softly, while Zeke waited patiently beside her. Finally, she spoke. My father was wrong about one thing. What's that? The fire. It wasn't just my face. She took a shuddering breath. The scars. They're everywhere. My arms, my neck, part of my back. I look like a monster, Zeke, like something from a nightmare. You look like a survivor, Zeke said firmly. You look like someone who went through hell and came out the other side. How can you say that when you haven't seen? Because I know who you are, Zeke interrupted. I know your heart, Rebecca, and that's all I need to know. Rebecca was quiet for another long moment. Then, with trembling hands, she reached up and began to untie the black veil. Are you sure? Zeke asked. She nodded. Though her hands were shaking so violently, she could barely manage the knots. The veil fell away. In the moonlight, Zeke saw Rebecca Ashford's face for the first time. The left side was unmarked, smooth skin, a delicate cheekbone, lips that trembled with fear and hope. But the right side told the story of her suffering. Angry red scars stretched from her temple to her jaw, twisting the skin and pulling at the corner of her mouth. Her right eye was partially closed, the lid damaged by the fire. She watched his face carefully, waiting for the recoil, the disgust, the pity she'd seen in every other pair of eyes that had looked upon her. Instead, Zeke reached out gently and cupped her scarred cheek in his palm. "Hello, beautiful," he whispered. Rebecca's sob was part grief, part relief, part disbelief. "How can you say that?" "Because it's true." Zeke's thumb traced gently along her unmarked cheek. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." "You're lying." "I'm not." His voice was firm, certain. "Rebecca, these scars don't make you ugly. They make you human. They tell the story of what you've survived, what you've overcome. They're part of you, and you're beautiful." She leaned into his touch, years of hiding and shame beginning to crack like an old shell. "Will you marry me?" Zeke asked quietly. Rebecca's eyes widened. "What? Will you marry me?" "Not because your father wants to get rid of you, not because I want your dowry, but because I love you. Because I want to wake up every morning knowing I get to spend another day with the most remarkable woman I've ever met." "Zeke, I know it's sudden. I know that you might need time to think about it. But I want you to know that what I see when I look at you is someone worth loving, worth cherishing, worth spending a lifetime getting to know better." Rebecca stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to memorize his face. "You really mean it?" "I've never meant anything more in my life." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down both sides of her face, the scarred side and the smooth side alike. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Word of the engagement spread through Esperanza like wildfire. By morning, it seemed the entire town knew that the mysterious veiled woman was going to marry the black rancher, and that she had finally shown her face. The reactions were mixed. Some, like Miguel Martinez and his family, were genuinely happy for the couple. Others whispered that it was a perfect match, a damaged woman and a man who couldn't expect better. Richard Ashford's reaction was the most explosive. "You will not marry that man," he raged, cornering Rebecca in the hotel lobby. "I forbid it." "You can't forbid it, Father," Rebecca said, standing straighter than she had in months. "I'm 26 years old, and I'll marry whom I choose." "He's using you. Can't you see that? He wants the land I promised as your dowry, wants to get his hands on our family money." "Zeke doesn't want your money," Rebecca replied calmly. "In fact, I've decided not to accept any dowry at all." Ashford's face went white. "What?" "I'm going to marry him with nothing but what I can carry in a suitcase. If he truly loves me, as he says he does, then my father's money shouldn't matter." The truth was that Rebecca and Zeke had discussed this at length. He had made it clear that he wanted no financial entanglements with Ashford. wanted no one to be able to say he'd married Rebecca for any reason other than love. "You're making a mistake," Ashford warned. "When the novelty wears off, when reality sets in, he'll abandon you. And then where will you be? A penniless woman with a scarred face and no family to take you in. Then that will be my mistake to make." Ashford studied his daughter's face, both sides of it, for a long moment. For the first time since the fire, she wasn't hiding. She stood in full view of anyone who cared to look, her scars visible but her head held high. "You're not the same girl you were before the fire," he said finally. "No," Rebecca agreed. "I'm not. I'm stronger now." The wedding was planned for the following Sunday, a simple ceremony in Esperanza's small church. Word spread throughout the territory, and people began arriving days early, curious to witness the union between the successful black rancher and the scarred woman who had hidden behind a veil. Some came out of genuine good wishes. Others came hoping for scandal or spectacle. On the morning of the wedding, Rebecca sat in her room preparing for the ceremony. She had chosen a simple white dress, the first white garment she'd worn since the fire. Her scars were fully visible, uncovered by veil or powder. Maria Santos knocked on the door carrying a small box. "A gift," she said, "from the women of the town." Inside was a delicate necklace made of turquoise and silver, crafted in the traditional style of the region. "We wanted you to know," Maria said, fastening the necklace around Rebecca's throat, "that you are welcome here, that you belong here." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Meanwhile, Zeke was getting ready in his own room, with Carlos and several of his ranch hands helping him with his best suit, a dark blue wool outfit he'd had tailored in Santa Fe. "You sure about this, boss?" asked Carlos, adjusting Zeke's tie. "I mean, I'm happy for you, but there's going to be talk." "There's always talk," Zeke replied. "The question is whether you let other people's opinions run your life." "And the señorita, she's really ready for this? For the life you're offering?" Zeke smiled. "Carlos, you should see her when she talks about the ranch, about the children she wants to teach again. She's not just ready, she's eager. She wants to build something good, something lasting." As the time for the ceremony approached, the small church filled with an unusual mix of people. Mexican-American families sat beside Anglo settlers. Ranch hands shared pews with store owners. At the back of the church, even some of the more curiosity-driven spectators had come. Richard Ashford sat alone in the front row, his expression unreadable. Father Miguel, the elderly priest who served Esperanza and the surrounding area, took his place at the altar. Despite his reservations about the unusual nature of the marriage, he had been moved by the obvious love between the couple during their pre-wedding counseling sessions. The church fell silent as Zeke entered from a side door, taking his place at the altar. He looked calm, confident, happy, a man about to marry the woman he loved. Then the main doors opened, and Rebecca appeared. A collective gasp went through the congregation. She walked down the aisle alone, her head held high, her scars clearly visible in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the church windows. She had chosen not to wear a veil, not today, not ever again. Some people stared in shock. Others looked away, uncomfortable with her obvious disfigurement. But Rebecca kept her eyes fixed on Zeke, drawing strength from his steady gaze and encouraging smile. When she reached the altar, Zeke took her hands in his, bringing them to his lips to kiss her scarred fingers gently. "You're radiant," he whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Father Miguel began the ceremony, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Ezekiel Washington and Rebecca Ashford." As the priest spoke about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage, murmurs began to ripple through the congregation. Not everyone was comfortable with what they were witnessing. A successful black man marrying a white woman, damaged or not, was still scandalous in many circles. But then something unexpected happened. "If anyone has objections to this union," Father Miguel announced, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The silence stretched taut. Then from the back of the church a voice called out, "I object." All heads turned. A man in an expensive suit was standing, someone none of the locals recognized. "And who are you, sir?" Father Miguel asked. "Thomas Caldwell," the man announced. "I had an arrangement with Mr. Ashford regarding his daughter, a financial arrangement that this circus is about to invalidate." Ashford's face went pale. "Caldwell, we discussed this. Rebecca refused your proposal. Because she was being influenced by this man." Caldwell pointed accusingly at Zeke. "I've heard the stories. He's bewitched her somehow, convinced her to throw away her chances with a respectable white man for this abomination of a marriage." The church erupted in angry murmurs. Several of Zeke's friends and ranch hands started to rise from their seats, but Zeke held up a hand, keeping his eyes fixed on Caldwell. "Mr. Caldwell," Zeke said, his voice carrying clearly through the church, "I think you've misunderstood something fundamental here." "Oh? And what's that?" "You seem to think Rebecca is property to be bought and sold, that her father's arrangements matter more than her own choices. A woman needs guidance. A woman," Zeke interrupted, "needs respect. She needs to be valued for who she is, not what she looks like or how much money comes with her." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Mr. Caldwell, you wanted to marry me sight unseen for my father's money. You didn't care about my thoughts, my feelings, or my dreams. Zeke has seen me, really seen me, scars and all, and he loves me not despite who I am, but because of who I am." She turned to address the entire congregation. "I know what you all think when you look at me. I know some of you believe I should be grateful for any man willing to take me. But I refuse to live my life as someone's act of charity." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Zeke Washington is the finest man I've ever known. He's built something from nothing, treated everyone with dignity and respect, and shown me what real love looks like. If you can't see past the color of his skin to recognize his worth, then you're as blind as those who can't see past my scars to recognize mine." The church was dead silent. Even Caldwell seemed taken aback by her passionate speech. Zeke squeezed her hands gently. "Are you ready to continue?" he asked softly. She nodded, tears of joy rather than pain streaming down her face. Father Miguel cleared his throat and resumed the ceremony. "Do you, Ezekiel Washington, take Rebecca Ashford to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Zeke said firmly, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. "And do you, Rebecca Ashford, take Ezekiel Washington to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Rebecca replied, her voice strong and clear. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Zeke cupped Rebecca's face gently in his hands, both sides scarred and smooth alike, and kissed her tenderly. The church erupted in applause, drowning out any remaining murmurs of disapproval. As they walked back down the aisle together, Rebecca noticed her father sitting alone in the front pew. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw something she hadn't seen in months: pride. Ashford stood and nodded to his daughter, not the nod of a father giving permission, but the acknowledgement of one adult respecting another's choice. Outside the church, the celebration continued. Miguel Martinez had arranged for a small reception in the town square, with music and dancing. Rebecca found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many of whom complimented her courage and beauty. "You know," said Mrs. Santos, the hotel owner's wife, "I think you're the most beautiful bride we've ever had in Esperanza." "Even with," Rebecca gestured to her scars. "Especially with them," Mrs. Santos replied firmly. "They show what you've survived, what you've overcome. That's real beauty." As the evening wound down, Zeke and Rebecca prepared to leave for his ranch, her new home. Ashford approached them one final time. "Rebecca," he said awkwardly, I owe you an apology. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself from having to face what happened to you." "Father, no, let me finish. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. And you," he turned to Zeke, "you're a better man than I am. Take care of her." "Always," Zeke promised. As their wagon rolled away from Esperanza under a canopy of stars, Rebecca leaned against her husband's shoulder, her veil forgotten in her hotel room, never to be worn again. "Any regrets?" Zeke asked softly. Rebecca smiled, touching her scarred cheek where his hand had been so many times. "Only that it took me so long to let you see me. We have a lifetime to make up for lost time." "Tell me about our new home again," Rebecca said. "About the children I'll teach, the life we'll build." As Zeke described their future, the school Rebecca would establish on the ranch, the family they hoped to have, the legacy they would create together, Rebecca realized something profound. For the first time since the fire, she wasn't looking backward at what she had lost. She was looking forward to what she would gain. Friends, we're witnessing something incredible here, a love story that defied every social convention of 1882, a woman finding the courage to show her true self, and a man who saw beauty where others saw only flaws. But this is more than just a romance. This is a story about the power of authentic love to heal wounds that go far deeper than the surface. If you're moved by Zeke and Rebecca's courage, make sure you're subscribed to the Black Rancher channel. We're committed to telling these untold stories of love, courage, and determination from the American frontier. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that real love sees beyond the surface, beyond scars, beyond what society tells us is valuable. Now, let's see how Zeke and Rebecca's new life unfolds. 6 months later, spring 1883, the transformation of Rebecca Washington was remarkable to behold. Gone was the timid, veiled figure who had hidden in shadows. In her place stood a confident woman who moved through the world with purpose and joy. The ranch house that Zeke had built as a bachelor's dwelling had been expanded to include a schoolroom where Rebecca taught the children of ranch workers and neighboring families. Word of her skill as an educator had spread throughout the territory, and families traveled from miles away to ensure their children could learn from her. Mrs. Washington called 8-year-old Miguel Santos Jr. Raising his hand eagerly during the morning lesson. "How do you spell beautiful?" Rebecca smiled, unconsciously touching her scarred cheek, a gesture that had evolved from one of shame to one of acceptance. "Beautiful. But remember, Miguel, true beauty comes in many forms. Like how your scars tell a story," piped up 6-year-old Mary O'Brien, the daughter of a neighboring Irish family. "Exactly like that, sweetheart." The children had accepted Rebecca's appearance without question from the very first day. To them, she was simply their beloved teacher, kind, patient, and endlessly encouraging. Their innocent acceptance had been a powerful healing force for Rebecca. Later that afternoon, as the children headed home, Rebecca stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching for Zeke's return from the far pastures. The view from their ranch was spectacular. Rolling hills dotted with cattle, the distant mountains purple in the afternoon light. She heard hoofbeats and turned to see a familiar figure approaching, but it wasn't Zeke. Richard Ashford rode toward the house, looking older and more weathered than when she'd last seen him. "Father," Rebecca said, surprised but not unwelcoming, "what brings you out here?" Ashford dismounted slowly, his movements stiff. "I came to see how you were doing. To see—" He paused, looking around at the thriving ranch, the well-maintained buildings, the obvious signs of prosperity and happiness. "To see if I was wrong about your choice." And he looked at his daughter, really looked at her. Her hair was pinned back practically, her dress simple but well made. Her scars were fully visible, but her eyes were bright with contentment. She radiated a peace and confidence he hadn't seen since before the fire. "You're happy," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm very happy, Father." "He treats you well?" Rebecca's smile was radiant. "He treats me like I'm precious, like I'm whole, like I'm beautiful." "You are beautiful," Ashford said quietly. "I should have told you that more often. Should have helped you see it instead of making you feel like you needed to hide." Before Rebecca could respond, they heard more hoofbeats. Zeke appeared over the rise, riding hard. When he saw Ashford, he slowed his approach, but his expression remained wary. "Mr. Ashford," Zeke said, dismounting and moving to stand beside his wife, This is unexpected. I came to apologize, Ashford said directly. To both of you. I let my fear and prejudice cloud my judgment. I treated my daughter like damaged goods and treated you like you weren't worthy of respect. I was wrong on both counts. Zeke studied the older man's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Apology accepted. I also came to ask... Ashford hesitated, then continued. I've been alone since Rebecca left. Really alone in ways I never was before. I was wondering if there might be room here for an old man who wants to make amends. Rebecca and Zeke exchanged a look. They had discussed this possibility. Ashford was Rebecca's only family, and despite everything, she still loved him. There's always room for family, Rebecca said. But Father, you need to understand. Things are different here. Zeke and I are partners in everything. Our workers are treated with respect regardless of their background, and if any of the children ask why their teacher has scars, we tell them the truth, that sometimes bad things happen to good people, but that doesn't make them any less valuable. Ashford nodded slowly. I think I have a lot to learn about seeing the world differently. We all do, Zeke said, but it's good work, the kind that makes you better than you were before. That evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the terrified, veiled woman hiding in a hotel room to a confident teacher and rancher's wife, the transformation still amazed her. Zeke, she said, leaning against his shoulder, do you ever think about that first night we talked, when I was so certain that showing my face would drive you away? I think about it often, he replied, his arm tightening around her. I think about how brave you had to be to trust me with your truth. I wasn't brave, I was terrified. Sometimes they're the same thing. Ashford, sitting nearby, listened to his daughter and son-in-law talk. He was beginning to understand what real love looked like, not the conditional affection he had offered, dependent on appearance and social acceptance, but the unconditional love that saw worth where others saw only flaws. Rebecca, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you, about the fire. Both Rebecca and Zeke turned toward him, sensing the weight in his voice. I've let you believe it was an accident all this time, but it wasn't. Ashford's voice was heavy with old guilt. There was a man, a business rival who was trying to force me out of a lucrative contract. He hired men to burn down my warehouse, to destroy my inventory and ruin me financially. Rebecca's hand went to her throat. Father, what are you saying? The fire was set deliberately, but the men who set it didn't know you were in the building working late in your classroom above the warehouse. When I realized you were trapped, his voice broke. I would have traded my life for yours in that moment. Would have traded anything to undo what my business dealings had brought upon you. You've been carrying this guilt all these years? Rebecca asked, her voice gentle despite the shock of this revelation. I destroyed your life because of my greed, my ambition, and then I compounded the damage by treating you like you were somehow diminished because of what happened. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she reached out and took her father's hand. Father, look at me, she said. Really look at me. Do I look like a woman whose life has been destroyed? Ashford looked at his daughter, sitting beside the man who adored her, surrounded by the life they had built together, radiating contentment and purpose. No, he whispered, you look like a woman who has found her home. The fire wasn't your fault, not really. And even if it was, it's in the past. What matters is what we do with the life we have now. How can you forgive me so easily? Rebecca smiled, the expression transforming both sides of her face. Because I've learned something important about love. Real love doesn't keep score of past hurts. It focuses on building something better together. She looked at Zeke, then back at her father. The scars from that fire led me to Zeke. They taught me to value people for who they are inside. They made me stronger, more compassionate, more real. I wouldn't change any of it. As the stars came out over the New Mexico territory, the three of them sat together in comfortable silence, each contemplating the winding path that had brought them to this moment of peace and reconciliation. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, cattle lowing softly, horses moving in the corral, the gentle murmur of conversation from the bunkhouse where Carlos and his family lived. "Tomorrow," Rebecca said, "I want to show you the school, Father. I want you to meet the children. They'll teach you more about accepting differences than any adult ever could." "I'd like that," Ashford replied. As they prepared to go inside, Zeke paused to look out over the land that he and Rebecca now shared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There always were in frontier life. But tonight, sitting here with his wife and even his former adversary, he felt the deep satisfaction of a man who had chosen love over convention, courage over comfort. "What are you thinking about?" Rebecca asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "Just grateful," Zeke said. "Grateful for a veiled woman who was brave enough to trust a stranger with her truth. Grateful for a love that sees beyond the surface. Grateful for a life that's turned out better than I ever dared to dream." Rebecca smiled, her scarred and smooth cheeks alike glowing in the lamplight from the house. "Come inside, husband. Tomorrow we start another day of building something beautiful together." As they walked into their home, a home built on love, acceptance, and the courage to see beyond surface appearances, the last thing Rebecca did was glance back at the night sky, silently thanking whatever force had brought Zeke Washington into her life at exactly the moment when she needed to learn that she was worthy of love just as she was. The veil that had once hidden her face was now just a memory. In its place was something far more beautiful, the confidence of a woman who knew she was truly seen, truly known, and truly loved. And there you have it, the incredible true story of Zeke Washington and Rebecca Ashford, whose love defied every social convention of their time and proved that real beauty comes from the courage to be authentically yourself. This story reminds us that the scars we carry, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, don't diminish our worth. They tell the story of what we've survived, what we've overcome, and how we've grown stronger. If this story moved you, I want you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Here on The Black Rancher, we're committed to bringing you these powerful, untold stories from the American frontier. Stories of courage, love, and determination that have been hidden from history for far too long. Second, share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear that they are worthy of love exactly as they are. Send it to someone who needs to know that real love sees beyond the surface, beyond scars, beyond what society tells us is valuable. Third, leave a comment below. Tell us what this story meant to you. Share your own thoughts about the power of authentic love to heal and transform. The American West was built by people like Zeke and Rebecca, individuals who had the courage to see beyond surface appearances, to love authentically, and to build something beautiful together, despite the obstacles the world placed in their path. These are the stories that deserve to be told. These are the heroes whose courage and love echo through history, inspiring us to be better, to love deeper, and to see the true beauty in every person we meet. Thank you for joining us on The Black Rancher. Thank you for caring about these important stories. And remember, in a world that often judges by appearances, be like Zeke Washington. See the heart, love the soul, honor the courage it takes to show your true self to the world. Until next time, keep riding toward truth, courage, and authentic love.